Welcome, everybody, to day 3 of the European Academy of Childhood Disability 2021. And this is the day about global partnerships. Last week, we spent a fantastic day talking about partnerships with users, families, young people with different developmental disabilities. And today we look at global partnerships across different teams, different disciplines, and we have tried to showcase some of the best examples, and we will try and tease out what actually is the potential. This is also linked into day 1 in the sense that because of the pandemic, we have come together much closer as a community. We are all now connected virtually, and we need to exploit the opportunities that these present. We had a fantastic time putting this program together, and I will invite Elizabeth to tell us a bit more about the people involved in putting this together.
Thank you. It has been a privilege to work together with this amazing group of people from all over the world. It is in the scientific committee, we've had Erika Klot from Sweden, Jenny Carroll from the UK, Kath Benfer from Australia, Angelina Kakosa from Uganda, Marek Joszwiak from Poland, Veronica Schiariti and Peter Rosenbaum from Canada, and Jeroen Vermeulen from the Netherlands. So we're happy to have been able to put this day together and hope you will enjoy the rest of the day. So we wish you a warm welcome. Thank you.
So we will start with our first keynote, and we'd like to invite Jenny Carroll, who is moderating alongside Kath Benfer. Unfortunately, Kath is indisposed today, so I'm going to step into Kath's shoes. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, everyone. Hi, good to see everybody, and very excited about today's session. So welcome, everyone. And a slightly different session, this one, as we're going to be talking a lot about the mechanisms behind some of the teamwork and the things that we're doing. So yeah, hopefully you'll all join in a very exciting discussion. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker very briefly. We've got some very short, sharp presentations, and that should leave us a good half an hour then to discuss afterwards and take some of your questions. So I'm going to do very short introductions to keep our timings, but there's bigger biogs on the website, so do have a look. Our first presenter is going to be Mary Jane Platt. Professor Mary Jane Platt is a public health doctor working in perinatal and paediatric epidemiology. She's been an active member of the Surveillance for Cerebral Palsy in Europe since its inception in 1998. Co-authored 15 of the collaborations and published more than 35 papers. And I have to say, on a personal note, she's been a fantastic support to us in Wales on our emergent Welsh register. So I'm going to hand over now to Mary Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Jenny. So the Surveillance of Cerebral Palsy in Europe group is a collaboration of cerebral palsy registers from across many European countries. It was established, as Jenny mentioned, in 1998, and its aims really are to monitor the trends, to raise the standards, to provide information for planning for services, and a framework for collaborative research all around cerebral palsy. The collaboration was initiated by Christine Cairns, and no discussion about SCPE can omit Christine. It was her vision, determination, and enthusiasm that brought us together and kept us together. One of the strengths of SCPE is the diversity of the professional backgrounds represented, including paediatricians, both specialists and generalists, other healthcare specialists, physiotherapists, speech therapists, epidemiologists, and public health professionals. And this multidisciplinarity was something that Christine was keen to encourage and support. It's a network of registers. Over the last 20 or more years of its existence, there have been 33 different registers represented, although while new registers join, others cease to exist. Currently, the network contains about 15 active registers, with each CP register being autonomous, collecting data on those with cerebral palsy in their own geographically defined area in whatever way they have determined works best for them, based on local rules and regulations and practices. Each centre is responsible for its own funding. Funding for the collaboration has come from a range of sources over the years, mostly through competitive bids, with the highs and lows associated with that. And it covers only the costs associated with the collaboration, the management and analysis of the pool data, and facilitating activities across the registers. Since 2016, the collaboration has been hosted and coordinated by the European Union through their science hub, the JRC, based in Ispra in northern Italy. This relationship has given SCPE sustainability and financial stability through the European platform on rare diseases. Over the years, too, collaborations have been established with CP registers in Australia and in North America, and with other networks within Europe, such as Eurocat and Peristat. SCPE has also worked as a dating agency, encouraging centres to work together on externally funded projects, the largest of which of these was Sparkle, on a project on the quality of life with young people with cerebral palsy. When this collaboration was first established, it was clear that different centres recorded similar information about the children with cerebral palsy in different ways. In order to harmonise the data and enable pooling of the data for analysis purposes, a series of working groups were established, and over the 3-year period agreed key principles for the definition and classification of cerebral palsy through the development of decision trees. These subgroups also defined key variables for inclusion in the core data set, such as gestational age, functional impairments, and comorbidities, and developed a data collection form. This early work of SCPE was described in its first papers. In addition to the development of the classification and coding system, the working groups allowed SCPE members to get to know each other and to understand the strength and limitation that each register works under. In short, it was a bonding process. SCPE continues to hold annual plenary meetings for all registers, where in addition to welcoming and supporting new and developing registers, work continues on refining, developing, and expanding the core data set. For example, this has led to the development of coding systems for neurological imaging, both MRI and ultrasound, and the development of the Viking speech scale, as well as work on quality assurance and using information from cases difficult to classify to educate each other and to refine and revise definitions and classifications. But cerebral palsy is a clinical diagnosis. One of the problems encountered by SCPE was ensuring that the clinical signs were described and classified in the same way, and that subtle differences were not missed in translation across the many languages spoken by SCPE members. Furthermore, when SCPE members had agreed a classification system for key features of CP, that system could be communicated unambiguously to other healthcare professionals contributing data to their local registers. This led to the development of the reference and training manual. This work describes key features of CP in words and in several different languages, but perhaps more usefully, use specifically commissioned video clips to illustrate the signs described. The RTM presents information on the key features of cerebral palsy in both a didactic form and in a quiz format, and has been used in educational and training well beyond the SCPE collaboration. The SCPE database, now managed by the JRC, comprises of over 22,000 cases and continues to grow. The collaboration has published over 35 papers and has uniquely mapped the changing prevalence of cerebral palsy across Europe. SCPE has gone through and to some extent continues to experience the forming, norming, storming and performing cycle of any group or organisation, but has managed to stay true to its original aims. As already mentioned, SCPE is now hosted by JRC, and more details of the collaboration, its tools, findings and publications are available on their website. And in particular, it's where you can access the data collection form, the RTM, and more details of the classification systems. So thank you all very much for listening.
That was, I think, a perfect 6 minutes there, Mary Jane. Well done. It's fantastic. Okay, has Andrea managed to join us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay, you're up next. I'll just going to briefly introduce you. So thank you very much for joining us. So Professor Andrea Guzzeta is head of the Stella Maris Infant Lab for Early Intervention, which is also known as SMILE, which is fantastic, associate professor at the University of Pisa Medical School and an accredited international trainer with the GM Trust. And what he's particularly going to talk to us about today is the BornToGetThere project. So I'm going to hand over briefly now to Andrea.
Oh, thank you very much. You can see my screen, right? Can you see my screen? Yes, thank you very much. Sorry. I'm very happy to present the BornToGetThere project here. I try to apply what, in a precise way, what was suggested by the committee using this new format of pictures going on every 20 seconds. So I'll try to be good at doing this. So the BornToGetThere project, first of all, the name is called BornToGetThere because we think that when a baby is born, the dyad is also born. And when a special baby is born, the dyad can face a very difficult times, but also is born to get there. So we have to provide all the help we can so that that baby, that family can get where they want, where their best goals and objectives in lives. And so why it is named, it is at the same time BornToGetThere and BornToGetThere. This is a European project that was funded by Horizon 2020. And it was a special call that was for implementation projects. So not projects that produce new research, but rather that apply knowledge that's been gathered in the years by former research. And a key part of the project is the team. And of course, this is Pisa, this is us, is our town where we are the coordinators of the project. We're very proud of it. And we have a long tradition of being interested in early intervention and early detection, but also other partners that are essential. One is, of course, Denmark and the University of Copenhagen and Professor Jens Borg-Nielsen. And Groningen is another key partner of the group with Ari Bos, who has this extensive experience in early detection, and he's part of the GM's Trust. You can see all these pictures of a river, a water. Actually, Copenhagen is not really a river, but it's still water, as if there was a river across Europe and beyond that was connecting all these partners. Then we have Tbilisi with Professor Nana Tadashvili, who is very active in the field of early detection and intervention, and is a key part of the network, together with our last clinical partner, that is Gopi Kitsanami from Sri Lanka. He also has hosted courses and trainings for implementation of early detection and intervention, and is very active in our team. This is not the last clinical partner, actually, because we also have Australia, who's not directly funded by Europe, but is in a connected grant funded by an HMRC from Australia. And Brisbane is the site where Professor Rose Boyd is part of the network. This is just to quickly understand what it is. The project is a knowledge translation, so it's implementation. You can see here a graph of knowledge translation and the three important streams: early detection, early surveillance, and early intervention streams of the project. So the first stream is, of course, early detection. The goal of the project is to push back to the very first days and weeks of life the identification of high risk of cerebral palsy. And this is very important so that we can have a clear conversation with parents, and we can understand their needs, and we can put in place intervention. The second stream is early surveillance. We need to follow these babies the first 2 years in a very thorough way in all the different aspects, so that all different aspects of development are taken care of. And so we have to share this knowledge and implement in the different countries and partners. And then the early intervention stream, that is, of course, the most important, because we have to share the knowledge we currently have on what should be done in babies at high risk of CP. And we are very lucky to be part of the network that developed and produced a week ago the published new guidelines on early intervention. So what are the challenges we faced? Of course, the first and biggest one is the COVID. It was very hard to work in this, especially for an implementation project that wants to share knowledge and to spread knowledge with teaching and learning. But we were very lucky to pass the difficult moments, and we started our trainings with Tbilisi. This is a picture of the house of Professor Tadishvili. I hope she doesn't, it's okay that I show this, but it's very beautiful because she has a full collection of paintings for all over the world. So I thought this was a very good example of interaction and interconnection. Of course, there are also difficulties and but also opportunities, and having all these trainings online was also an opportunity, because we had the chance to meet more often and to have good good meetings and good work together very fast. The key element of a project like this, however, is the project manager. So I'd like to acknowledge Olena Chorno, is our amazing project manager who made all this happen and make us all always on time. This is where we want to go back to. We want to go back to the beautiful courses full of people without masks, full of social not distance, and hugs, and again, back to where we were, maybe being a little bit better, being a little bit more aware of difficulties. But this is the goal of the project. So I try to share in a very short time the challenges, also the beauty and the secrets of winning the successful project. Thank you very much.
We're going to now cross to our third speaker, who's Professor Veronica Schiariti, who's an Associate Professor from the Division of Medical Sciences in University of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. She's a physician scientist, and her work bridges clinical research and international child health. She's been very key in the development of the ICF core sets for children and youth. And she's leading the Children's Voices project, which she's going to talk to us about today. So I'll hand you over to Vera.
Good morning, good afternoon. I hope you are all well. It is a pleasure to share my abilities first as an example of a global partnership. I have nothing to disclose. All my ideas and opinions are guided by the ICF and the conventions on the right of the child and people with disabilities. The project started with this qualitative study where we asked children with cerebral palsy to describe what functioning meant to them. And we learned the importance of doing research with children and not on children. And the title summarizes the finding. He does not see himself as being different. And we learned that children celebrate their abilities and facilitators. So for me, that was a starting point of my abilities first. This project breaks with the traditional view of disability in healthcare and trying to emphasize a rights-based approach and why it's important to include a positive language in healthcare. The idea is to include systematically abilities first from the perspective of the children or the individual with a disability. I published this paper describing the project last year, and it was included in a special issue dedicated to disrupted education, which is interesting to think about why talking about abilities is considered disruptive education in medical care. Briefly, my abilities first includes brief educational animations asking people to reflect on how you describe yourself and why we concentrate, why it's important to concentrate on abilities and how we can create my abilities first identification card, sort of a passport in healthcare, describing abilities and using positive language. You might remember that we share an example of a program using an abilities-oriented approach last year at the EACD conference, and it was describing the accessible care pregnancy clinic in Ontario, Canada. So how do you start these global partnerships? It's important to start building connections, and this was a growing process over the years while we were working on ICF-related projects, and I'm going to show you some of the examples. How it works, the idea is to share information and in this case, the goals of the project, and each one of the teams in their countries, they'll do cultural adaptations of the materials and the educational material. Is key to have leadership, clear leadership in each one of the teams, and using innovative strategies depending on the setting that you are going to use the project. Feedback and modifications are always useful, and you need to be flexible about, the output and the outcomes of the project, and active dissemination, like sharing information in presentations like this one. You know that a global partnership is working when some of the team take the project and make it better. And this is the example of Taiwan. Taiwan has one of the best healthcare systems in the world, and they took the project and made it better. They created educational courses in different settings, like educating teachers, educating physiotherapists at the university level. They created a team, the first national My Abilities First team, and they invited different stakeholders from the Department of Education, from the government, from different professionals. And you can see one of the pictures, they did a workshop inviting parents and children and creating My Abilities identification cards. They also created a Facebook page dedicated to the project, and they are working nonstop disseminating their work at a national level. Brazil is another example. They took the project, but you know that Brazil has been going through a tough time due to COVID. So this is an example of how they're starting a quality improvement project, inviting children with different disabilities to share their abilities and create My Abilities identification card using short videos or a picture or a drawing. So this is another example on how a different team in a different country, in a different level and situation can adapt the project. The idea is that each one of the teams report back, and we share information about the progress of the project in each one of the countries. I finally want to mention My Abilities First in Poland. You might have seen some of the examples that about abilities first coming from Poland, and I want to mention that they created a group, My Abilities First group, that facilitated kids with different abilities to share their opinions, and they created beautiful videos that you can access here. What are the secrets to a successful partnership? For me, it's having a common goal. And this picture illustrates the project. We're building something together, which is which makes us having fun and share joy. There are many things, many words that can describe what we're doing and how we keep the teams motivated, share interest, rights, hope, good motivation, and hoping for a positive change. I think this is a common goal. The shared interest is truly and meaningful social inclusion for kids with different abilities and regardless of the physical limitations. Lesson learned ongoing. It's key, as I mentioned at the beginning, to involve children, young adults and their families to work on this project. We need support and local networks, and we need to keep educating the public and all the professionals involved, serving and providing services for children with disabilities, advocacy for rights, and I think communities are ready for a change. In conclusion, the message is we should focus on disabilities and not disabilities. And in this conference, for the first time, we're sharing abilities first using a positive language on the front page of the meeting. So I think a change is in the air. And I want to say thank you to everybody who participated and helped the children to participate in this global campaign. The EACD launched a couple of months ago about My Abilities First, and this campaign has been replicated and is being replicated in other regions of the world. And thank you very much for your attention.
So we have the fourth example of a very successful partnership, and I'm privileged to say I was part of that partnership. And this was the International Alliance of Academies of Childhood Disability, who created a task force on the COVID-19. And Bernadette Gillick led this initiative, and it was a wonderful experience over the 6 months. And we are all keen to hear about it. Bernadette is associate professor in the University of Wisconsin, and her interests lie in high-end research into magnetic cranial stimulation in hemiplegia, children, unilateral cerebral palsies, but she has a wide range of interests. So welcome, Bernadette, and please tell us more about the collaboration that you were involved in.
Thank you kindly, Arnav. And can you see my screen?
See it perfectly.
You can see it? Can you see my screen and hear me?
We can see your screen, we can hear you, and we can see you, Bernadette.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that confirmation. So thank you for the opportunity to present today. I appreciate that very gracious introduction. I'm thrilled to be here. And as Arnav just mentioned, my involvement is for today talking about the chemistry of a successful partnership in a very unique way in terms of this COVID task force. And this task force met throughout 2020. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Let's set the stage. So before COVID hit, we were doing this. We were running around. We were able to see each other. Andrea just showed a fantastic set of pictures of actually being able to stand together, talk with each other, hug each other, and interact. And so we went from this to this, and we all know that, where things changed immediately. And with this challenge also comes opportunities and silver linings. And so we had to really look at what are we going to do with this situation, but also as concerned individuals involved with children across the world, how do we connect instead of disconnect? And where do we go? So the world might have temporarily closed, as it were, but we needed to try to open doors and get further in terms of how we could unite our efforts and accomplish the goals and objectives of our collective work. And what are the goals of our collective work? Well, they're the children with whom we work, and they are affected, and they were affected. And we all knew that, and we knew that across the world, and that was very concerning to us. Additionally, the concerns that we had were for the families who are caring for those children, the caretakers, and the challenges that they had in trying to adjust their schedules and also continue to have care for their children during this stay-at-home pandemic and all of the mandates that occurred across the world as well. The other one was to care for the healthcare providers, those who are caring for these families and children, and give them the support that they needed in the ways that we could. So together, we worked with the chemistry of all of us across the world. So how did we do this? We developed this collaboration by over 50 researchers and healthcare professionals from over 45 countries. We met over 100 times in 2020, and we had diverse cultural perspectives and experiences, and the realities that we faced and those that we saw were being faced by the children and the families and the workers, we realized across the globe. So our immediate goal was to help people with disabilities during the pandemic and to support healthcare professionals providing services to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. And so what did we aspire to do? We aspired to create a response framework upon which to build now during the COVID pandemic, and then for future health, economic, or environmental emergencies as they arose. So we had an opportunity to work together worldwide in a novel manner. You can see all of the different locations from which we united, but the challenge is how would we do that? So we created this task force, as was mentioned, and we combined all of our ideas, these greater than 50 individuals, to divide into 3 subgroups. And so we looked at surveys of individuals across the world, surveys that were being held and surveys that were in process to understand more information of the impact of COVID-19 across the world. We also developed a resource subgroup to disseminate and identify resources that would be helpful for these children and families and healthcare providers. And we developed a listening and sharing subgroup so that we could look at how to listen and learn more and also share our ideas as we moved through the pandemic. And so we have an International Alliance of Academies of Childhood Disability Knowledge Hub. And in that Knowledge Hub, we have these resources right now. And so we look to all of these 3 different subgroups. The subgroup for surveys has links to ongoing surveys and completed surveys and is working and disseminating this information at this very time. We also had the resource subgroup. So we have help for families. We have ways to support remotely and successful ideas across the world that were aggregated through 2020 that individuals can use as their basis for successful ideas. And these pictures on the right, as I'm showing, are the locations where all of these different professionals came together for these different subgroups as well. The last subgroup was the listening and sharing subgroup. And we held over 100 different sessions, and one remarkable session happened on the World Cerebral Palsy Day. On that, 2,200 people registered. There were 19 sessions over 24 hours, held in 6 different languages, over 45 countries, with 18 different disciplines. And a lot was shared and much was listened to, and we are continuing to aggregate this data as well. But the opportunities were far-reaching. So I'll show you just a quick clip in terms of there were in these listening sessions and sharing sessions, there were people from Australia, the United States, East Africa, Fiji, India, Ireland, Israel, China, Mexico, the Netherlands, Poland, Singapore, as well as Sri Lanka, Turkey, and Wales. So these happened all within 24 hours based on the tasks that we performed. So what were our secrets for success? Well, we found each other despite it all across the world. We did it with commitment, late and early hours. We did it with drive and compassion, trust, bravery, and a lot of humor got us through this as well. And so what are the lessons learned? Well, this is just an intermission, and we are going to see each other soon, but yet we can work together through these challenges. These children are worth it. They're waiting for us. They're excited to continue to work with us, and they're ready to go. And so here we are, we can form successful global partnerships. This is a snapshot of many of us to address childhood onset disability in a changing world. And together we truly are stronger. And as was said by one South African member, we truly can spin the world together. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Bernadette, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, introduction for you, and I think I was just talking to myself. So I've logged out and come back in, and we seem to be back. Can we go to panel view now and see everyone? All appearing. Thank you. And very different collaborations doing very different things. So really interesting to think a little bit more about the mechanisms and the thinking behind what you're doing. And again, older and newer collaborations. Mary Jane, it was quite interesting. I thought that you were talking almost about the mechanisms and trying to get things lining up across many different communities, as well as the whole challenge of the relationships. So what do you think was the biggest challenge in harmonizing data? And I guess it's asking if others of you have had similar kind of issues with that as well, because we all use different terminology and words.
I guess it was the subtleties rather than the big things that people had more difficulty agreeing on, because just communicating those subtleties was sometimes quite hard. And the working language is generally in English, but the different translations, particularly of the sort of colloquial expressions that are used in different countries, sometimes made it quite difficult or challenging anyway to get some of those finer details right, and indeed occasionally amusing. But so that's why we did the reference and training manual, really, because that was the doing things visibly was a much easier way of ensuring that we were all doing the same things in the same way.
Yeah, it sounds like that's been quite a journey. One of the questioners has said, what would you advise people setting up a collaborative project to transform initial enthusiasm, which we often see, then into a long-term sustainable project? You were talking about starting off with someone's idea and how that becomes a long-term project. So I don't know who wants to take that as a start. I guess Mary Jane, you're probably the most sustainable so far. What are your tips for everyone else, and perhaps then they can come in with their suggestions or queries. So it's what's made, do you think how do you transform from that initial idea into a sustainable project?
Yeah, I guess I think it's the bonding. Yeah. So
the people, we're saying this, the people side of it is a really important part.
I think it's the bonding. I think it's the doing things together, and making space to do things together. It's always.
I would add to that in terms of the title of this session and the chemistry of it.
I think perhaps because registers are ongoing, and they are they are ongoing, so everyone's got an interest in people. Yeah, but because the projects that each of them are doing individually is ongoing, the benefit that they get from coming together and sharing the problems and solving the problems together, I think, is what makes it a two-way thing.
Yeah. Thank you. And Vera, you've obviously got sort of collaborators now from across the globe growing on your initial idea, what are your thoughts in how to keep that sustainable, and where do you think the challenges will be going forwards? I mean, again, lots of people are doing these sort of initiatives alongside other work as well, aren't they? And it's how to keep that enthusiasm going.
Yeah, I think, you need to be flexible about, what you expect. I think that you can share ideas, and then you need to be flexible that people will make the project their own. And there are no timeline is like, I think the enthusiasm that you can do something and include people in your country, in your region, and then having the support and learning from others as you go. Like, I think it's a big motivation to know how they did it, in like trying to learn lesson learns and share, this is a difficult path and this is better. Including kids sometimes a challenge. People might say, how do you really go about having this process and getting them really involved? Different countries will approach that differently, so that's why you need to be open-minded but learn from each other. I think that's it's a live project, if you want, and you have to celebrate every step and every new idea.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, isn't it? Is having those milestones along the way so that you can celebrate the things that you've sort of achieved and done. And I guess, Bernadette, that kind of comes through as well with the COVID project, slightly different in terms of it's got a start and an end more than being an ongoing project. Or do you see it having a way forward in another iteration of some form?
I think that's a good point, because that task force was very intense, and it had a lot of time intensity and effort intensity, and yet we knew we were working towards developing a framework that could be utilized beyond what we were doing during the COVID pandemic, so that it's something that we could expand upon. And I think all that was just mentioned is really important. I also think, this idea, and I mentioned this before, was of chemistry, of truly saying that we have a commonality here. For all of our differences, we actually found so many more similarities. We have a common goal. We share that common drive. And so a lot of that effort was, especially, it becomes more and more a wave that everyone likes to join together and seeing, we are not alone in this. There are many of us who would like to participate and work together. And the other thing I'm going to say, and not to sound trite, but humor is such a big part of that, and really, truly enjoying yourselves. And every one of you have mentioned that very, very same thing is, well, how nice to enjoy each other and to look at these wonderful things, such as Mary Jane said, we have our own colloquialisms and such, and to have a good laugh on that, and to learn and to be able to appreciate that humor is something we all enjoy. And the children with whom we work certainly express that to us often. So, but I think that it was a start and finish that we all knew would go long beyond what it was that we were working with COVID.
And I think that's a good point. I was listening to something on the radio yesterday that was saying we've been talking a lot about infection lately when we're all thinking about the negative side of it. But actually, there's a really positive side, and enthusiasm and things like that are very infectious. And that gives us a way to drive some of these kind of projects forward that otherwise seem like a very big task. But when we're doing it together and you're enjoying interacting with people, yes. I think that's a really strong,
Jenny,
extra superpower.
Jenny, could I butt in there? And I think one of the other things in the team, which was very, very important, and I think is applicable to all situations, is the leadership. And certainly you need somebody to be guiding and leading, and that keeps the focus on the task. And certainly within the COVID-19 task force, we were all brought together, and we delivered within a very specific high-intensity time frame. So that's another key to the success.
Yeah, I think a hugely important key to the success for each of the projects. You know, it's really important to have that person that's driving and making sure you're going in the direction that you planned and staying on task. And does that in itself create problems where there's a less identified leader, or, you know, have people found leadership being a challenge? How has it been within your project, Andrea? Because you've got a very diverse group again across the globe.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can comment on my leadership skills, but I agree leadership is very important, especially because we all need to have a vision of what we're doing that goes beyond the practicalities of everyday work. And I think in my case, it was very easy because the strength of the project is based on hundreds and hundreds of hours of work from other people that have established that knowledge, and we only need to translate that. And so being passionate and maybe thinking a little bit out of the box was enough to be a good guide, I think. But especially, I don't think I have many skills, but I have one that I consider very important, is being able to choose good people. And I am surrounded by very, very good young people that are really doing all the work. So yeah, leadership and collaboration, and also ability to delegate and to give trust to young people that have much energy and then also a good management task management software that's also helpful.
Yeah, and I noticed, you know, you've got a project manager on your team as well, because they're slightly different roles, aren't they, in terms of managing all the logistics and having the leadership of the team.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a work on its own, and it's really, I think that it's the real key for a successful project, to have someone who is dedicated 100% to that project, and has also competence not only in how to manage in general a project, but also in the actual theme of the project. In our case, she's a wonderful therapist, so she knows very well also the details and the science behind it.
And we have a lot of sort of development, don't we, in terms of our clinical skills and our scientific skills, but it's not an area that we put necessarily time into, thinking how should we develop our leadership skills. I don't know if any of you have had experience of leadership programs that you found helpful, or things that you've done, or just ideas around that thought.
I will offer this, that Vero had mentioned how important it is to spend the time to listen and to actually know that there can be ideas that might not completely agree, but those ideas are so important. It's important to take the time to listen to perspectives from all members of the team. And sometimes, you know, it may seem as though there is not a defined end to it, but that's okay, because it might open a new door which you didn't think. So very good point.
Yeah,
it's that's one of the things.
Oh, sorry.
One of the things that I noticed in the early days of SCPE was that we sometimes felt, it felt to me sometimes that we were going round and round in circles. But I realized that actually we needed to go round those circles 2 or 3 times so that everybody could catch on. Again, particularly because of the language issues, but also because of the multidisciplinary backgrounds from which we were all coming from. And so sometimes we did need to go over things 2 and 3 and 4 times before everybody was on board. And that was a very important part of getting and keeping everyone on board.
And it's that balance, isn't it, between making sure you've got everyone on board without going and heading off, but still having that direction and the momentum. And it's making those judgments that can be quite difficult. You were going to say something, Vera.
Yeah, I think that it's important to invite new people to these groups as well. We're used to work with the same people because, you know, we know each other and because we have done previous projects. But I think being open-minded and invite other people like with energy and new ideas, that's also a good thing. And that's why you have an idea, but you need to be open-minded about how people will approach that idea in their region, and they are the experts in that area. So I think you need to be quite flexible and inviting people to the table to really share new approaches. And I think that's we're gonna, you know, invite more people and encourage more people to work together. Like, I think we feel that this is the way forward now, that, you know, we work and learn from each other.
And I think the more you widen those networks, the more people you've got helping work in that direction.
Could I ask the panel about a few other things people have mentioned without necessarily focusing on them? Things like funding. So some of you have mentioned that there's been funding available, and I know that some projects haven't had any funding. How important is that? What about political will or any kind of other backing? How important are those kind of things to the success of your teams? Andrea.
Funding is pretty important, I think. It's really essential because, well, first of all, we all think when we get a grant rejected, we always think, well, maybe there was something wrong, maybe it was not good enough, and to start with. So it's not helpful to have peers that don't recognize a good project, and we start to doubt about ourselves. But having said that, of course, having funds is essential because you need resources to do things, and you need resources to motivate and to have people involved. I think there are a lot of very good projects that died because of lack of funding. Unfortunately, there are some that survive because of funding, but probably finding the good balance between these two things would be good. Yeah.
I would be on the heels of that in a different way, Arnab. So the COVID task force had little to no funding. And so that was an important point, is it's different than the different types of programs that were just spoken about, because there was a beginning and end, and it did create a framework, and we had some funding for what we do at the Knowledge Hub. But again, it was defined as you said, politically, how does that actually influence? It was the opportunity for different countries to be able to view what's happening across the world and give some support to the different areas, whether it be the underserved areas and such. So we had more knowledge than we were gaining in our own countries. And I won't name out specific countries, but there were some countries that could not often even attend our meetings based on their accessibility in the internet. So at the time, for that brief, and I'll say brief in terms of a year, but for that brief challenge with that task force, we were able to develop collaborations that I think will lead to some very productive funding opportunities and some very productive future collaborations and good chemistry as well.
And a group of highly motivated individuals, which made up probably for the lack of funding.
I think that's very true.
Thank you. I wonder if we could just finish off with a final thought from each of you of your hot tip for the collaborators out there. I'm going to start with Mary Jane.
Thought you might.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I think it's about being friendly and welcoming, and very much as Vero said, always broadening, more new people all the time. You don't want to become a clique or it to become a sort of hierarchical organization. And I think going back to what Andrea was saying, I think funding is important, but I think there has to be benefit for the participants, and whereas where sometimes that's funding, but sometimes it's papers, sometimes it's knowledge. People only put in if they get out, and so even if what they get out is not as tangible, that's what keeps them involved.
Great, thank you. Andrea?
I guess the single hot tip I could give is similar to what Bernadette was saying. It's having a lot of fun. I think enjoying the work, enjoying the meeting, enjoying the meetings with your team, being open to really listen to everyone and have fun. This is what we think is a key ingredient in early intervention, and so why shouldn't it be important in us as well?
Absolutely. Great, thank you. Vero?
I think you need to choose something that is exciting, like you are really motivated to work with or without funding. Most of the project related to disability, like we don't have a lot of support, but we can make a change. We can advocate even for funding for new trainees, and in some countries there are none. So there's a lot to do, and we just need to keep trying.
Great, thank you. Bernadette?
So I would say that the children know this, but somehow as adults we forget this, that we never underestimate yourself and others, and what the power of belonging and working together really can do. It's infectious. And that's why I love working with children, because they teach us that every day isn't the whole point to play? So that's what we're doing. We're just grown-ups playing, and we're trying to do it and have that kind of cohesiveness and that chemistry. So I think the best thing is don't ever underestimate the power of a good group, and certainly yourself with that group.
Yeah, and that play and playfulness is so creative, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you very much from 4 fantastic leaders of 4 fantastic projects, and it's been great listening to you all and hearing about your projects and sharing ideas of what's made them all such great successes. So thank you very much.
True pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.